video, I mentioned the concept of servant leadership. Let's talk a little bit more about that idea. Robert Greenleaf is the man who is credited with the development of the concept of servant leadership. He'd spent 40 years at AT&T in the true heydays of the corporation, in the days when it was a monopoly, and by nature of that monopoly, they ruled all that they surveyed. And his work was to find the best management and employee development strategies and teach them to the company. Well, Greenleaf soon became concerned during his time at AT&T that the authoritarian hierarchy there just wasn't very effective at getting the best work from the most folks. So he left AT&T to found the Center for Applied Ethics, and that's where he developed his thinking that he called servant leadership. Now, the idea, he will tell you, or he would tell you, came to him in a creative insight that was inspired by long-form reading of a novel, and that novel was by Hermann Hesse, titled Journey to the East. The story very briefly is that Hermann Hesse, he's got himself named, he names the main character Hermann Hesse in the novel, joins other creative people on a pilgrimage across Europe to find truth. This pilgrimage is on foot, and they've got musicians, and they've got poets, and they've got all sorts of creative folks engaged in this pilgrimage with all of their baggage, and after a few days they are joined by a baggage handler, a man named Leo, a servant for these pilgrims. And Leo brings such an extraordinary delight to the way he goes about doing his work for the pilgrims. He's efficient for sure, but he's also just filled with song, filled with story, filled with wonderful, wonderful, delightful approach to his work that the men are soon feeling so engaged and so enlightened and so delighted by having Leo around. And the pilgrimage is successful, goes through a very successful phase, and the men all of a sudden feel like this, in fact, is exactly what they ought to be doing. Well, at an important time in the pilgrimage, when they're faced with a physical challenge of crossing a ravine, that morning when they wake up from their campsite, they discover that Leo is no longer around. Leo has left the pilgrimage. Leo has disappeared. They try to find him. They can't find him. Soon they're bickering. Soon they're angry with each other. Soon they're disappointed with each other. Soon the pilgrimage loses all of its forward momentum. Soon some of the pilgrims begin to leave, and eventually Hermann Hesse himself abandons the pilgrimage and goes back to his fictional job in the novel, which is a newspaper reporter. And some years go by, and one day his editor says something that strikes a memory in Hermann Hesse, and he thinks that perhaps based on this comment that his editor has made, he might actually be able to track down Leo, the baggage handler. And he finds Leo, and Leo invites him to come to an extraordinarily important meeting where, in fact, Hesse will find the truth that he was looking for in his pilgrimage. Leo leads Hermann Hesse through the crowded cities. They approach the hall where this event is going to take place. As they enter the hall, once again, Hermann Hesse loses Leo. But he's settling in. He's with the crowd. He realizes that a crescendo is occurring, that a buildup is occurring, that soon something important is going to happen, and the curtains part, and the procession comes out, and there, leading this organization, is Leo, the baggage handler. He wasn't just a servant, he was also a leader. That lobe that gets all hot and glowing before your inside occurs must have gotten all hot and glowing for Robert Greenleaf, because he came to his intuitive insight, and that is that if you would lead, first you would be a servant. Greenleaf's elevator speech for servant leadership is something I'm going to read for you now. If you've not heard the phrase elevator speech before, it's the concept that when you're engaged in an entrepreneurial activity, when you're trying to promote and get something new going, you should always have that concise statement of what it is you're trying to accomplish, so concise that if you wind up on the elevator with somebody that you have to recruit, you have to impress, you have to engage about your idea, you can tell them the idea during the course of that elevator ride. So here's Greenleaf's elevator speech for servant leadership. It begins with the natural feeling that one wants to serve first. Then a conscious choice brings one to aspire to lead. The difference manifests itself in the care taken by the servant first to make sure that other people's highest priority needs are being served. The best test, and difficult to administer, is, do those served grow as persons? Do they grow while being served? Do they become healthier, wiser, freer, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants. Now, servant leadership might very well be one of the big, originally creative ideas that would be available through incremental and logical work. For each step in that direction would prove to have such pragmatically positive results, I can only imagine that once you are on the path, you'd want to keep following it, step by step, until you are deep into the land of servant leadership.